Good morning and welcome to our devotional today. Today's I have a little bit of a different feel. It's one where I feel if you've taken the time to tune in today, that as you've pulled up a chair and you've sat right down and we've had the opportunity to have a devotional together, rather than me trying to just teach you something, it's us just trying to be inspired together, see what God has for us. I've been going through a devotional book, and so everything's not an original thought. It's one where I'm inspired by what I read, and I want to share it to you in that way today. As if, just like I said, like you pull up a chair and you've sat down here today. It's a Max Lucado book that I just wanted to show you, and it's Max Lucado for these tough times. Tough times that we're in. Can't figure everything out. Been speaking of that a lot lately, of not even knowing really what to say or how to respond. But in this chapter, the title is in the silence God speaks. I just want to share some of these things with you today. It's coming from the story of Job, and Job gets so much attention in Scripture for being, the patience of Job. But Job really went through a lot in his life where he didn't respond right. He did things wrong, and then God just welcomed him back after a time of questioning. And you may be in that very time of questioning and falling into some bad places. But let's just see what this says to encourage us today as we sit down together and have this devotional. When we're hurting, sometimes we find healing by talking about God with friends, a counselor, to God. But eventually the time comes to stop talking and listen. These are times when we speak is to violate the moment, when silence represents the highest respect. The word for such times is reverence. This was the lesson Job learned. The man in the Bible most touched by tragedy and despair. If Job had a fault, it was his tongue. He talked too much. Not that anyone could blame him. Calamity had pounced on him like a lioness on a herd of gazelles, and by the time the rampage had passed, there was hardly a wall standing or a loved one living. Enemies had slaughtered Job's cattle. The lightning had destroyed his sheep. Strong winds had left his partying kids buried in wreckage. Job knew what it was like to lose those he loved when the building collapsed. Job hadn't had time to bury his children before he saw the leprosy on his hands and the boils on his skin. His wife, compassionate soul that she was, told him to curse God and die. His 4 friends came to the bedside manner like drill sergeants, telling him that God is fair and that pain is a result of evil, and as sure as 2 + 2 = 4, Job must have some criminal record in his past to suffer for. Each had his own interpretation of God. Each spoke long and loud about what God is and why God had done what he had done. And they weren't the only ones talking about God. When the accusers paused, Job gave his response. Back and forth they went. The verbal ping pong continues for 23 chapters, and finally Job has had enough. And he, answering, says this: no more group discussion, no more group chit-chat. It's time for the keynote address. He grips the microphone with one hand and the pulpit in the other, and he launches forth, and for 6 chapters Job gives his opinions on God. This time the chapter headings read, and Job continued, and Job continued, and Job continued. He defines God, explains God, reviews God. One gets the impression that Job knows more about God than God does. We are 37 chapters into the book before God clears his throat to speak. Chapter 38 begins with these words, and then the Lord answered Job. The Lord answered Job. God speaks. His face turned toward the sky. Winds bend trees. Neighbors plunge into the storm shelters. Cats scurry up trees. The dogs duck into the bushes. Something is blowing in, honey. Best get the sheets off the line. God has no more than opened his mouth before Job knows he should have kept his sore mouth shut. God flows with the sky with queries. Job cannot help but get the point. Only God defines God. You've got to know the alphabet before you can read, and God tells Job, you don't even know the ABCs of heaven, much less the vocabulary. For the first time, Job is quiet, silenced by a torrent of questions. And Job barely has time to shake his head at one's question before there's another. The Father's implication is clear. As soon as you're able to handle these simple matters of storing stars and stretching the neck of the ostrich, then we'll have a talk about pain and suffering. But until then, we can do without your commentary. By the time we get to Job 40, verse 4, Job says this, I am not worthy, I cannot answer you anything, I'll put my hand over my mouth. Notice the change. Before he heard God, Job couldn't speak enough. After he heard God, he couldn't speak at all. Silence was the only proper response. It just made me right away think of Psalm 46:10, where it says, be still and know that I am God. We have this opportunity with being flooded with questions and being flooded with opinions and being flooded with what everybody else thinks, and it gets into our spirit, man, and we start responding in ways and that just aren't pleasing to God, and my spirit gets to just get restless. But we get this command to be still, and with this command to be still, there comes a promise. Be still and you will know that I am God. It's time for me to be still. It's time for you to be still. It's time where you talk too much and I talk too much, and we need to put our hand over our mouth and just listen to what God has for us. So I encourage you this week to practice that. When you start feeling in your spirit getting edgy, getting like your responses aren't godly, or wanting to lash out in ways that wouldn't be pleasing to God, to just stop. Be still and know that He is God. Be still. Maybe you have to put your hand over your mouth as a reminder, because the promise is coming. If you will just be still, you will know that He is God. Thanks for joining me today. It's been great having you sit here and just hear what the Lord has for you. I'm inspired. I hope you're inspired, and I hope your week is awesome. Love you. Have a great week.